Well, thank you everyone for attending. Believe this is our fourth webinar of this series, the dashboard training series. We've also done some of the module series, and we're also doing some webinars on NPSP, the Nonprofit Success Pack. But of the dashboard series, this is the fourth one. And what we did in the last couple of webinars was build a couple of things. So we built that donation interface and portal from scratch, and we used a little bit of everything. We used the forms, the listing blocks, and things like that. And this webinar, we're actually going back to basics a little bit, where this is really just some CMS tips and tricks. I know the last webinar might have felt a little bit advanced for some of you. This is not going to be like that. We might, if we have time, we might get into two things that are a little bit more advanced, but this is really just items in the CMS that are there. Some of them have been there for a long time, but sometimes they're missed just because you're not aware of them, or we haven't talked about them enough. So what we wanted to do is go back to that basics and do a couple of CMS tips and tricks, and we'll do these throughout the year. So why don't we start by defining what the CMS is? I'm sure everyone's familiar with this. If you've used HandsOn Connect or LlamaSite, you probably interacted with it, but it's the content management system. It's really, when you're in HandsOn Connect or LlamaSite, is what allows you to configure the site to look the way you want it, have the content you want, and the functionality. And there's, one of the strengths of HandsOn Connect and LlamaSite is the CMS, because it's incredibly flexible, and it also brings that integration with Salesforce that is not really available anywhere else. And though I've mentioned Salesforce, this is probably one of the last times I'm going to mention it. This webinar today is really exclusively in the CMS. So I don't think we're going to go into Salesforce at all, unless someone has a question around it and I have to go in. So some assumptions just to set the tone here of what we're going to be. I said this is going to be really basic. It is. We might do a little bit of advanced items. It is important to have a basic understanding of HandsOn Connect and LlamaSite, of Salesforce. I guess I just lied. That's the second time I mentioned it. And then we will do some maybe advanced tricks. It just depends how the time goes. But otherwise, we're just going to be covering some basic CMS. So the idea here is when you build in HandsOn Connect or LlamaSite, and just to highlight, if you're a HandsOn Connect customer or you're a LlamaSite customer, you're in the right place. The CMS is very similar in both. And if there's something that's in HandsOn Connect that's not in LlamaSite, I'll point it out, and vice versa. So the idea here is with your portals, what we call portals is the CMS part, the part that most of your end users see, is incredibly flexible. So has a lot of tools to really increase the user value, but also their engagement. And also an engagement can be that making them spend more time on your site, do more of the transactions you want them to do, and also attract more users organically or through other ways. So what we're going to be covering today is some CMS basics, page SEO, the search engine optimizations. We're going to talk about some recovery tools of versions in the recycling bin, also about Google Analytics and Tag Manager, the Facebook verification code, social media icon colors. That's just to give you, that sometimes you have more control over items, some items than you think you do. Also, how to export form data. We're also going to look at dashboard settings. This is a HandsOn Connect only feature. And then if we have time, we'll do the last two, which are a little bit more advanced, which is how to set form defaults and how to do, actually one of the ways of doing modal forms. And really that's a whole topic on itself. But it is a fairly new feature that we always try to share new features when we can. So, okay, so CMS basics. I know we've done the CMS webinar a couple of times. I don't think we've done it in a couple of years, but we always try to set the architecture of it. And this is probably more geeky than anyone really needs, but it is important to understand that when you're working in the CMS, you're working on pages. So anytime you add something, you're most likely adding it to a page. So how is a page structured? So you have the page, which usually the page, all it has is a name. You give it a name and you give it a URL so folks can find that page. And then you either have that URL and give out that URL directly, or you tie it to something. You tie it to a menu item, you tie it to a link on a page, to a workflow or something that people can get to that page. Now, once you have the page is going to have a couple of components to it. So it's going to have the layout. And the layout is basically how the page is organized. And the reason the layout is important is because the job of the layout is to keep your page consistent throughout your site. Now, you can have multiple layouts, and most of you have multiple layouts. You at minimum usually have a home page layout and an internal page layout. In addition to that, you also have mobile and tablet layouts. And so we won't get a lot into the mobile and tablets, but that gives you a lot of power of and choices on how you want to do. You can have different layouts for mobile and tablet and desktop. So, but like I said, we're not going to spend a lot of time on that. But the layout, although you don't spend a lot of time doing anything as far as modifying or anything like that, when you add a component to a page, you're basically adding it to the layout. And it's important to understand that the layout has sections in it. So usually you have like a header section, you have a main content section, and a footer section. That's the most basic layout usually. And then sometimes you have like a menu section, you have a slider image section, and these sections are just blocks where you can, actually that's a really poor choice of word because blocks mean something else, but it's basically parts of the page where you can put blocks in. So the idea is once you have a section, like the little drawing here, we have our main section, then you can start putting your blocks. And your blocks is really what has the content. And a block can be something static, like an image block or a content block, or something a little bit more dynamic, like a featured opportunity block, a listing block, a form block, and things like that. So anytime you create something that is your content or functionality that's going to be on your site, it is most likely going to be a block, and that block has to be placed in a section, and that section lives in a page layout, and the page layout lives on a page. So that's the idea here. And the reason this is important, because when you add a block, it's going to ask you what section are you adding it to. Okay, so with that, I'll go ahead. So let's start with really with SEO. So the search engine optimization, not everyone is looking for this. Search engine optimization is really ways for your site to become more popular. And by popular, I mean that you're getting more users and you're getting more qualified users. And by qualified, I mean that users that land on your site are not simply landing there and doing nothing. They're actually taking some action that you're interested in them taking. So it could be becoming a volunteer, signing up for an opportunity, signing up for your newsletter, downloading a document, filling out a lead form or something like that. So the idea here is that if you're looking for your site to become more popular, then you want to pay some attention to the SEO. And there's a ton of things you can do, and there's a ton of documentation and websites on this. Really what we're focusing on here is basically maybe the 101 that you should do if you are interested in that your site performs better in search engines. And by search engines, I mean like Bing and Google and those search engines that when someone searches for a word that you think your site should come up on the top of the listing, it actually does. There's other ways to improve traffic to your site, and probably most popular is working with social media sites like Facebook and so on, and having inbound links to your site and content there and spread it out to bring that in. But like I said, this is really on the CMS side. It's just a couple of things you can do to at least make sure that you have the basics implemented. So with that, we're going to jump into, let's escape here. And I'm going to go to a website. So on this first hands-on part of the webinar, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about pages and SEO together. So basically that whole little spiel I gave you about how the architecture of the site is in terms of pages, sections, and so on. So we're going to talk about that, and at the same time we're going to do SEO. So I'm here on this happens to be a LlamaSite, but you'll see it's identical to HandsOn Connect. So I'm here on a page. So this is a page for an event, and so if I open this page here, there's two ways I could get to it. One is I could click on this little pencil here, and that would open the page. Two is I could just look for it on my menu on my page listing here. So I'm going to open this here, and you're going to see that I have my basic page structure. So I have a page title or name, and I have a URL. So you'll see that my URL here carries that is what the user will type in. But the only reason I'm spending is because I know this is super basic. The only reason I'm spending any time on talking about the friendly URL is because in search engine optimization, the URL matters. So this is a really poor name for this page. So a better name would be something that's a little bit more descriptive, which might be, because I could turn this into something like this. And a good practice is to keep everything in lowercase, and you can't have any spaces. So this will perform better in SEO because the URL is giving information to the search engines than just have a generic name. Same thing with the event title. This title here is important because it shows up on the top of the page. So you see how here it says HandsOn Connect Demo, it's what shows up there. So I'm gonna also rename that. And I could show title, but I'm also showing it down here, so I don't really repeat it twice. Okay, so I've already done a couple of page basics here. And then I will add my content. We're going to jump to the content a little bit later. But the main thing we want to drive here is that there's two things here at the bottom of pages that can help you with SEO. One are the meta tags. You'll see that they're right here. And two is add to sitemap. So the meta tag, you'll see that there's two types. There's these that say OG and those that don't. The OG ones are more important because OG stands for Open Graph, and it's really what most sites, including Google, but especially social media sites like Facebook and Twitter, use if your content gets either tagged or linked or anything on that site. What will end up happening is this is where it will pull the information. And if it doesn't find this information, it will try to find whatever else it can find. But this way it gives you a way to control what shows up. So if this page is important and you want it to, when it's linked in social media, to show a particular way, then you should make sure that you put these in. So the title might be the same title as here. And then to add that meta tag, I would just click there, and you'll see that it was added down here. And so if I needed to edit it, I could edit it here. If I needed to delete it, I would delete it there. And then you probably at minimum want to do the title and description. Site name, image is somewhat important in this page, because what's going to happen is if the social media sites hits this, it's going to guess between this image here and the logo. It's going to look at what images are here, and it's going to try to pull the best image. But it's not best because that's what you want. It's going to pull one of them. So if you want to make sure it pulls this one, then you want to make sure that you put that URL in here. And so I can come here, put my image here, copy that. Meta, and now I have that image. Now, of course, when I went back, I didn't really save my meta tag there. But I'm going to do two of them. And save this page. So you notice that the changes I made don't show up at all anywhere on this page. And so if you're really, 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 really curious of where this ended up, it ends up in the HTML. So the HTML is the code behind this page that gives you all the formatting, placement, everything here. So if you're in a browser these days, you can go to inspect. You just right click anywhere, click inspect. You can scroll all the way to the top, And you'll see that there's these what are called head tags here. And this is where all that information shows up. So you'll see that my OG title, it automatically put my Twitter title in there. And so all this information that's up here in this header section behind, and like, I mean, your end user won't see it unless they do what I just did. But this is important because this is what search engines and social media sites use to basically show what they think they should show of your site. So this is where it all ends up. Now, I said there was two things down here. One was the meta tags. The other one is add to sitemap. Okay. Now, sitemap is basically a structured way of your data that helps search engines determine how your site is set up and how to navigate it. But more importantly, it tells the search engine which pages you think are important. So you don't want to go checking this off on everything. You just want to check it off on pages that you really want indexed. And then once again, if I save that, it doesn't show up anywhere here, but there is a URL. Oh, okay, good. Now I forget what the URL is. Esteban, can you send me the URL? Or Godwin or Jenny find out, and I'll show you all. It's sitemap something. I think it's sitemap XML. No, I forgot. I'll try that.
Just a minute.
Okay, well, that's the problem when you think you remember and I really didn't. Okay, but I'll show you what that looks like. So the idea here is that you can check that box. It will put it in the sitemap, and search engines, if your site have a sitemap, it's not required, and most sites don't. If it has a sitemap, it will use it to index your site, and it will index it, and it will index it in a more precise way. A couple of other things you can do on SEO that are available through the CMS are a couple of things that are important. Some are very, very basic. So when a bot hits your site and to index it, one of the things it's trying to determine is how important is this content in the context of your site. So it assumes anything in the home page is important because you put it there. Anything the secondary page is probably not as important. But once you get to a page, it needs a way to determine what's important or not. And one of the easiest, there's a lot of different things you can do, but one of the easiest things you can do is make sure that your headers, which are basically your titles, the ones you try to bold or make the font large or anything like that. It determines what's more important by what your titles are, but it needs to know that it's a title. So if I just come here and I'm going to put this as normal text, like I just typed it in, and if I come here and just bold it and make the size bigger, visually it gives me a lot of it works. It tells me that's an important header of my site. But from the SEO perspective, it's a lot better to use your header tags. So instead of doing this, is to highlight your text and go here where it says normal and use your headings. And so if this is the most important heading on the site, that might be heading 1. And you want to make this descriptive. So it's just not, section 1 or introduction or something like that is not necessarily a great heading. But this is telling the bot that when it comes here, since I marked this as heading 1, this is really important. And then down here, I have another one on how to participate, which is also heading 1. But what I probably want to do, this one I don't think is as important. So you want to give it a lower one. So think about, as you create content on your site, how that hierarchy works, and use your heading tags using the drop down, and make sure that the number you select the larger one, the lower number but larger size heading. That 1 is the most important, 2 is the second most important. So that will really help the search engine determine how to prioritize the content on your site. And then the last thing I was going to say about SEO here is that anything you put on your site is content that probably has some value for indexing. So when you put an image, for example, an image, the search engines don't really know what the image is. They don't have a clue. They don't know if this is a group of what seems like teenagers running into the desert, or if it's a happy face eating a hamburger. They really have no clue. So one of the things you can do is, if you put an image, especially on a page that is important for you to be indexed, is to put some tags on this. So you'll see that if I come to this image, right click, I can either right click and click on image properties, or click on the image and click on the little image icon here. It will open this interface for me, which is probably how you select the image in the first. And it has this alternative text. So this is really what the search engines can read. And so although this is, I mean, there's text there, but this is not informative. So it depends what you want to convey with this. So image for about us is probably not great, but if really you want to provide, image of teenagers running now. So this does two things. One, it gives a lot more information to the search engine, but it also, for your accessibility, for people with any handicap, where they're using readers or anything like that, this will also describe the image to them. So it is important to take some time, especially on those pages that from the accessibility side, it should be on all pages. From the SEO side, it really should be, you're only really need to focus on the pages that you want are important for you to be indexed. But putting a description like this really helps this image you put to become part of the value towards your search engine optimization. And the last thing I would say is, because bots can't interpret yet what's on the image, they probably will real soon. It's better that you don't put text in images. It's better that you put the image and the text around it or over it or something like that, but it ends up as text. Okay, so now I think I covered everything here. Another tip is that a lot of times you're working on the site and you make some edits, and then you realize, oh, I want to revert to a previous version, or you delete something that you want to come back. You have both version control and version recovery and a recycling bin. And so they're not exactly the same. So let me just walk you through them quickly. So if I'm on this page, I made a couple of edits here. So remember that I changed the header here. I put the alt image here, the alt text for this image. I changed, did I end up changing this one? No, I didn't. So I should have changed that to heading 2. Okay, now I'll go ahead and save this. And let's say that now I realize, oh, you know what? I made some mistakes here. It's easier for me just to revert to a previous version and start again. Or I prefer the previous version. That's why I want to go. Most of all our pages and most of our blocks have version control. So you can come here and it'll give you the last 20 versions that are available. So if I wanted to go back, and you'll see the date it happened. So if I want to go back to this one, I just hit retrieve, and it will put that content as of that date in here, and I can start again from there. I like the edits I just did, so I'm not going to do that. And that is also true for other for other blocks. So if I come here to contact, so this is an HTML editor block, I have my versions here. And most blocks have this. There are some that don't. So for example, forms don't have version controls. So, versioning, what allows you to do is basically revert to a previous version of the content you're working on. That it'll be available in images, sliders, and such. The other piece is if I delete something, I can it will go to my recycling bin. So, and this is when I say something, I really mean is a component. So I can go here to my recycling bin. You'll see that I organize pages I deleted, menus I deleted, menu items I deleted, blocks I deleted, and opportunity sign up flows. So let me now I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to I'm going to delete this block here. So if I come to this block here and I go and I remove it, it's gone. So I said, oops, I really didn't want to do that. So I can come to my recycling bin and go to my blocks, and you'll see that it's here. So now I can restore it. And that's those are the two pieces here that if you run into something that you didn't want to do, that gives you a chance to recover it. Okay, the next piece is Google Analytics and Tag Manager. So for those of you who don't know what a Google Analytics is, it's basically a way to track users on your site, where they're, basically what pages they're on, how many site visits, how many page views, how much time they're spending on the site, how much time they're spending on each page, and what's the path they're taking through your site. And so not everyone needs Google Analytics. Most of you probably should be using Google Analytics of some type, and we do track all the sites and we can provide reports, but this does Google Analytics really allows you to configure any way you want and track different things. So if you want to track your site, make sure that you're tracking it with your Google Analytics. And the way you do it is super simple. It is basically, if you come to your add-ons, there'll be a section called Site Settings. And when you open your Google Analytics account, which is free, it will give you set up your website. It will ask you for the URL, a couple things, and then it will give you a Google Analytics code. And so you would put that code here. There's two versions of this code right now. Either one will work. There's the old version and the new version, basically. And then if you're using Google Tag Manager, you can also use your Google Tag Manager code. So Google Tag Manager it might be, I don't know, maybe a little bit more advanced than Google Analytics code, but it's really more of a tool to put all your Google tags in one place. So if you're using Google Ads and things like that, and that way you can just put one tag here, one code here, and then in the Google Tag Manager, you put your Google Ads, you put your Google Analytics code and all that, and you don't have to be configuring here every single time. With one code, it will track everything. Okay, that was just to make sure that you all knew that you could put your own Google Analytics or Google Tag Manager code there. You can also do your Facebook verification code, and you might have caught it when I was, because it's in the same section of site-wide settings. You'll see that you can put your Facebook domain verification. This, I'm not going to spend, this is really mostly if you're using Facebook Business Manager, which is a way to create more traffic to your site and organize your content and things like that. But if you're using it, just know that you can put your verification code and link and authorize the site for Facebook Business Manager. This is this is just a really simple one. This tip, if I go to, you'll see that down here we have our social media block. So this is one of the blocks that's available to you in the CMS. And if I click and open this block, it allows me basically to create a little banner of all my social media properties. So if I'm not using YouTube, I could take YouTube out and it wouldn't show that icon if this is blank. But you can put the ones you are using here, and then display and see if you're going to put the title, which is up here, in line to the left, above, and all that. But really, what we're pointing out here is that a lot of times we get requests that you want different colors here. It's really simple to change those colors. All you have to do is come here, and then you can change the color. So the first color is the color that shows up when. So I'll go ahead and we'll make this one this light red, because I know it's a dark background. And then it's basically the color when you load the page, and when you put your mouse over it or you hover over it, this is the color. It will take this other color I'm about to do. So it's going to be a bit more of a gray. And you'll see that it changed the colors here. Now, if you notice that when I came here, there was nothing there, and it still had a color. And that's because when we help you set up the site at the beginning, we take your color template and we set all the defaults. So if you want to go back to the default, you don't need to go guess what that yellow was. You can just clear these values and it will go back to the defaults that that you probably provided to us and we set up for you, so that even if you didn't put any information in this, it would give it a default color based on your color palette. And note that this is also available in places like here when you do the login button, you can decide if the login button is going to be a button, a link with an icon, and things like that. But you can also set the colors for things. So there's a couple of the blocks that we have that will basically format something very specifically, but you always have a little bit of control on making modifications to that. Okay, exporting data, form data. So let's talk about capturing data. So probably one of the more popular and probably one of the more powerful things you can do with your portals is capture information and edit information. And so if you're capturing information, you basically have two options. You can capture information and just capture it, and it will save it to the CMS, or you can capture it and save it to Salesforce. So since this webinar is about the CMS, we're going to talk about you wanting to just capture some information and not save it to Salesforce. So and then how do you basically get that information? So I have a form here. This donate now form. And so I did all my basic things. I gave it a name. I put it in the correct sections like we talked about earlier. And I put a couple of fields here. And I assigned it to a page called Donate Now. So if I go to that page, here's my Donate Now page. So okay, so if I submit this information, and I will put, let's put Alfredo, and this will be my email. HOC. Okay, so I will submit this. It was saved. And it actually took me to another form, which is to capture my experience. But I want to, now I've had this form up and running a while, and I want to have access to the information. but because I chose not to save it to Salesforce, it's not in Salesforce. So how do I find it? Well, first, make sure you remember the name of the form. Sometimes it's good to remember the number of the form. We see a lot of times that, I mean, I do this quite a bit. I name all my forms in a very similar fashion. So sometimes when I look at all the names together, it's just, I'm not sure which one. But I can see it's the 5820 form up here. So if you go back to add-ons, you'll see that there's an export form data. And then I can look for it here. And so it's this form right here. And then if I want to, I can export it. I can give it a date range from when to when I want to export it. I can make sure I include the submission date in the report. Click export, and it'll download it to a CSV. I can open it with Excel. And you'll see that that's my submission right there. My first name, last name, email. So this is if you need to download data and you want to capture data quickly, you don't want to do the connection to Salesforce, this is a way to do it. This will also work in conjunction if you submit to Salesforce, which is always a good way to, I mean, if for some reason you deleted the record in Salesforce by mistake, you can always try looking for it in the form data in the CMS to see if it's there, so you can at least recover that record. Of course, Salesforce has its own recycling bin and all that. Then the other thing you can do here, that's a recycling bin, because I said, is if you want to clear, you always have the option to clear the data from the form if you don't need it anymore, or if you don't want to have it here, you already have it somewhere else, or you already have it in Salesforce, you could delete it here. There is one thing that you do have to keep in mind, that if you are using, and this is quite advanced, but if you are saving to Salesforce and you're using an encrypted field, it will only save it to Salesforce. It doesn't save it locally for that specific field. Okay, so let's go to the next one here. Okay, dashboard settings. This is one that's only available in HandsOn Connect. And this is more of a FYI of how your system is set up. So I'm going to go to a HandsOn Connect instance here. And if you log into the sharing portal with your HandsOn Connect client account, you will see on your left menu here this dashboard site settings link. And this basically tells you what's enabled on your site. There's obviously other things that are not listed here, but these are basically the main components and the main settings. So you'll see that for this instance, the advanced registration is turned on. So is allow sharing portal forms, so is the Apple login and things like that, but avoid overlapping connections is not. And so you'll see that you can go through here and see what's enabled on your instance or not. And then you can also see additional things, for example, password settings. So if your organization requires a certain complexity of the password, you'll see that this instance is set to really minimum in terms of password complexity. It really only 6 here. It doesn't require, it never expires. So it's important that you take time to look at this to make sure that the settings of your site are set the way you need it. And I know a lot of times this was all set at the beginning when we first onboarded you, and you might not remember, or we might not have really even covered it. We just gave you the default. So you can always come here and see how the settings is. The session is basically the length of time that a user has to log in. Again, so basically, if I log in today, Monday, and I don't log in until next Monday, morning, I wouldn't, technically I would, and I'm in the same browser and I haven't really closed any sessions, I shouldn't have to log in again. This is 7 days is the default for everyone. It can go up to 30 days. We don't do more than 30 days. Display time zone is a setting of the time, how the time zone is going to be displayed, and then custom state format. It's basically how the states are abbreviated, and then there's what we call private instance. This is really important for customers that have very sensitive data. Then basically all of these should be turned off, but it will tell you you can come here at any time. So this is basically if we're not sharing data with like all for good or anything like that. So it's you can see that this instance is not, that is turned off. Okay, so that's the dashboard. Just know it's there if you're kind of curious of what how your site is configured, what's enabled, what's not enabled. Here it is. If you have any questions, definitely ask us. You can open a ticket, come to lab. If you do need a change here, let's say that you come back and say, hey, I really need the passwords to require at least a number and one character and one symbol, then just open a ticket and we can make that change for you. Okay, so before I get into the next ones, which are the kind of like the bonus ones, let me ask, does anyone have any questions?
I have one question. So when you were talking about syncing, I assume that it syncs to the leads object. Can I add custom fields to that form and then add those custom fields to the lead for them all to sync?
Yes, you can.
What about money?
You want money or you want to give me money?
Can I do anything by collecting? You said donate. Will that already sync to our payment if I do that in the form?
Yeah, so in the form, if you're using the payment component, so I'll spend some time on that. So let's say that I wanted, so I added this form, and now I want to receive a payment here. So I can, you'll see if there's a payment component down here on the left, I can drag it up here. And then there's a couple of settings here. So there's, you pick the processor that you want. You can leave it in, for testing, you can leave it in sandbox, but once you go live, then you're going to switch this to production. And this is where you would put your, in this case, whatever PayPal gave you as a client ID and a secret ID. I'm going to leave it in sandbox just so we can show it. and then here there's a bunch of different things that you can. So if you're not using this as a donation form, you can replace donate with pay.
Could I see the one about checks? Allow banks. When you say yes, does it give something like a ID to attach to our bank?
No, what this only works with authorized.net, I believe that. So it just allows you to select as a payment, as a check, basically a credit card or check. And if you put check, then it will ask you for your routing number and account number and all that.
Thanks.
So basically, you set the things up you hear, and then you set what you're doing. So let's say let's a membership, for example, and then let's say it's 125. And capitalize messages, so it looks a little bit better. And that amount, and then you can decide how you want to display this, and I'll just leave it as is. And then this is where you map the fields that your processor returns to you. So basically there'll be a label field, there'll be an amount field, there'll be a transaction ID from your processor, a transaction status, and basically if you have more than one payment method, a payment method. But since we're not linking this form to Salesforce, I'll just leave it like this. Save it. And you'll see that it added this payment component here. And from here, you can configure it quite a bit. So you can obviously add other amounts here. I'll see membership, let's say 1. 200. And then I can also decide how I want to list this, if I want to do it vertically, or allow them to enter their own amount, for example. And you can also hide this icon. There's all these different things you can do. Cool. Any other questions? Or okay, so we're gonna do two quick things here. So I'm gonna require for someone to make a donation to be logged in. So it means that if they're logged in, I know who they are. But I want them to be able to make a donation using this form. But I want to pre-fill this with the information of the person that's logged in. So I want their first name to show up here, last name, and email. And so the idea is, I'm going to do two things. Something that's quite advanced but quite easy to do, which is called custom session variables. So the way I want you to think about this is that when someone is logged in, we know who they are, and they're tied to a contact in Salesforce. So if I log in as myself, as Alfredo, there'll be when I log in, HandsOn Connect or LlamaSite is going to Salesforce and seeing, does this contact record exist? Is this contact authorized to log into this portal? If it is authorized to log into this portal, is it active? It goes through this whole thing and then checks my username and password and makes sure everything is okay, and then it logs me in. So when you're logged in, one of the things that both HandsOn and LlamaSite is really, really good at is talking back and forth with Salesforce. So because I'm logged in and HandsOn Connect or LlamaSite knows who I am, I have access to these custom session variables. So what this is a way of me bringing information from Salesforce into the portal so I can use in different places. So I said that I wanted the first name, last name, and email. So I can come here and say, when someone logs in, I want to have available, because I want is their first name, I also want, when they log in, I want available their last name. And I also want available their email. Okay, so now what's happening is every time a user logs in, I will have what technically is called in my session, this information available to me. So I'll have their first name, last name, and email. And so you go like, well, why would I want that? So, well, there's actually really advanced things you can do that are really incredible. This is probably the least advanced thing of them all, but it's somewhat useful because I want to improve the usability of this form, because I don't want them necessarily have to type their last name, their first name, last name, and email again, but they might be donating on someone else's behalf. So I want them to be able to change it if they want. So now that I have that information in session, I can come here, and if I come to the first name, you'll see that there's a default value here, and I can put my session variables there. So you'll see if I type S:, for session, it will give me the fields that I just added here. So I can put S name, first name, and I'll save that. Now, you could remember to type S:, which is by far the easiest, but for any reason you forget, you can always come back to your custom session variables, and you'll see that the name of what we call the token is there. So that's what needs to be in that default value. So what that token is telling HandsOn Connect or LlamaSite to do, or the portal to do, is that when they come here, if there's a value, put the value of this, even if it's blank here. So we'll just go ahead and do it for $2, we'll put the last name. Okay. Okay, so now I have my form set up. Now I'm logged as a CMS user, and as a CMS user, I'm not really a user right now. So I'm going to go back to, I'm going to go to our instance here. Okay, I'm going to put that URL there. So notice that when this form loads, it puts those defaults in there. I know this is really minor, but I just wanted to show a huge improvement in usability that you could do by setting your defaults by using session variables. So you get to use something that's really advanced with your session variables with something that's quite basic as defaults in a form.
So question on that though, that makes all sense. How will the user know that they have to log in, and where would they log in? So if I fill out the form, I'm going, I want to donate to my this organization. It populates who I am. How did they know they had to log in?
Well, I mean, what you would want to do, there's a couple of things, but really the very first thing you should do is make sure that this page requires login. Okay. So you could come here. You actually have like two ways of doing this. One is you can come to the page itself, and you can say it requires logged in users. In this case, it's saying it inherits it from the menu item. So if it inherits it from the menu item, then it's going to be based on this right here. So I can go to my menu item, look at donate, and this is not set for login. So you're absolutely right. I would probably want to make sure this is So basically, this does two things. One, it doesn't show the donate button unless you're logged in, and two, because the form is inheriting that setting from the menu, you wouldn't be able to get to this page unless you're logged in. The other thing is you could also require a login here. You could say you require that
makes more sense. Okay.
And you actually get two different usabilities there, because if you just do the form, then basically this page loads on the public site with the image, because the image is not require login, but the form will say, we'll have a little message that says to complete the form, you have to log in, click here to log in. While basically telling the other page, telling the whole page that it requires login, I believe it gives you an error. It just says you're not authorized to access this page.
One more question. When you put in all the custom variables, if you put first, last name, and you don't say what form it goes to, would that cause a problem?
No, not at all. They're just sitting there in the session. Okay. Notice that I assign them, so otherwise, I could, if you're not using them, they're just sitting there in the session until you need them. I wouldn't recommend creating session variables for fields that you don't need, because they'll just be taking up memory. But yeah, if you're not using them, it's no big deal.
Do we have a limit on our memory?
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there is. There's a limit to everything, but
okay.
I don't know what that would be. But it's also good, programming practice and implementation practice is, only bring in information that you need. It's a good security practice too. Okay, so any other questions?
No, we're coming up on the top of the hour, Alfredo.
Yeah, so I owe you Modal Forms, which is fine, because this is probably a whole webinar in itself. But it's a really cool new feature that came out a couple weeks ago, and it just really increases the usability in the site. Some of you might, especially for those who had one of our modules like the shopping cart or the wish list, module or any of those, you'll see that we're switching to a lot of modal forms now, which all this means is that when you click on the form to open, it doesn't take you to another page and loads a whole new page. It opens the form on the same page. So it's just a better experience. It's faster. And it's not the solution for every one of your forms, but it does create a lot of possibilities. But we'll talk about this most likely in our next webinar.
A quick question about that, Alfredo, and thank you for this training. This was awesome. I know you'll dig into this for the next one on modal forms, but if a user has like pop-ups blocked, is that something that will affect the form from popping up?
I don't know. I'll have to detect them. Now, I've been using them quite a bit and I haven't run into that. I don't think they're considered a pop-up.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, modal windows are not considered pop-ups.
Oh, that's good. We have our tech chief here, so
Thank you.
that's official.
And another clarification, the sitemap you were showing for the SEO is not being generated because that instance is set to private, so no site map will be generated.
Okay, but I could probably show it since now you reminded me. I still owe it. I could probably show it on the Explore site, right? Is it site/sitemap still?
Yes, that's correct. .xml.
Oh, that was close. Okay, this is what the sitemap looks like. You'll see that this site is it's just basically a cheat sheet for your search engine optimization bots, so that they can quickly see what you consider is most important of your site. So I got sneak that one in at the end. But with that, the hour's up, and so we'll be announcing the next webinar soon. It'll be in a month's time, and as always, we have. Trying to find my webinar here, so I can put it on the last page here. So the one we did right now is advanced training in series. We're actually putting together the next group of webinars on our dashboard series. Most likely the next one will be more in forms. We also have the shopping cart and events coming up, which is, I know we've talked about the shopping cart, but basically this is using the shopping cart with events is a little bit different. And then we still have our Salesforce series going on. Those are on YouTube. You can go to our channel, and they're mostly around the nonprofit success pack, and they go pretty in depth with the nonprofit success pack. So they're great to watch. With that, I'll let you all go. If you have any questions, let us know. We'll stick around for another minute or two. If not, open a ticket. Thank you all.